Hey class, Prof. JC here. In this episode, we're going to talk about 7 ways to be interesting. 7 ways to be interesting. I love what we're getting ready to talk about here. I think that this, based on chapter 8, based on chapter 8, this might be one of the most value-add chapters in this book. Obviously, you know, if you're going to connect with people, if you're going to lead people, if you're going to teach people, you've got to be interesting. People have to be able to listen to you over and over and over again, okay? So let's talk about this. John Maxwell says this on page 173. After giving thousands of speeches and communicating for decades, I have learned some things on how to be interesting to others and make communication an experience that everyone enjoys. Okay, so he's just kind of introducing it there. He says, as you prepare to communicate, no matter whether it's to one person, to 100 people, or to 1,000, right? Try to do as many of these 7 as possible as what we're getting ready to talk about right here. Okay, so this first one is very important here. Number 1 is this, okay? 7 ways to be interesting. Number 1, and this is very important. If you're going to be a speaker, if you're going to be a leader, take responsibility for your listeners. Take responsibility for your listeners. He says this, I often hear presenters talk, and I've heard this before, and I've done this before, okay? And actually reading this was really challenging for me because it made me realize I've got to step up my own game. I often hear presenters talk about bad audiences that they've spoken to. Usually they're describing people who don't respond favorably to their speeches. I think they've got it wrong. In general, there are no bad audiences, only bad speakers. If the audience is asleep, somebody needs to go on stage and wake up the speaker, okay? He goes on to say here, he says, almost everyone has heard the expression, you can lead a horse to water, but you can't make him drink. That may be true, but it's also true that you can feed a horse salt and make him thirsty. In other words, you can work to keep your listeners engaged. There's a, I'm just gonna be transparent with you. Right now, and I don't think I'm going to do this very much longer because my schedule's getting so busy with my work here at Point Loma and then the training that I do in the marketplace. But I've served as a teaching pastor for my home church, which is down in the South Bay. And so I'll teach there every now and then. And I've told people for years, because I've been there at this church for about 9 years now. And so I've been teaching there for about 9 years. And the first service is typically the older congregation. Now, they're good people. They are very good people, and they keep that church alive. They keep the church going. And they're some of the best people I know. But they're not always the most engaging audience, okay? And, I mean, I've been up there, and I think I'm a decent speaker. I love to get on platforms and speak. It's something I love to do. It's a passion. It lights my fire. I've told people for years, that is one of the toughest crowds I've ever spoken to. And I've told people too, if you can speak here to this crowd, to that first service crowd, you can speak to anybody. Okay. The second service crowd. And again, if any of you go to church, you might know this as well. Second service is always a little bit more lively. People are awake. That 9 o'clock service, you know, people have to wake up at 6 or 7 in the morning to get there on time. So they're just not quite as into it. But I'll tell you this, for the first few years, 2 years, I would gripe and complain about them. And I'd say, man, these people are horrible and they don't know how to listen and they don't care. And they're just the worst crowd to speak to. And then it was this book. And then there was one other by another pastor, Andy Stanley. He talked about this, how to reach out and really bring people in. And so what I realized is I had to change even between on that one day, it's same message, but I had to change up how I spoke to first service versus to second service. With first service, I learned be much more serious. Don't bring in jokes that I might, second service is typically younger, people my age, and, they'll get the jokes that I get. They're from the same, like I grew up in the 90s, right? The music of the 90s hip hop. And that second service tends to understand that. So if I make 90s references or early 2000s or something like that, they'll understand that. But the first service is typically older. And with older people, I found this too, okay? Anywhere you go, they're going to be more suspicious listening to a younger person talk because in their mind is, say, what do you have to offer me? And so I've learned even in that first service, I've got to find examples that get to them. So for instance, if I'm speaking to a crowd of older people, and again, it's more of a church setting. Now this is a church setting, not a business setting. Okay. It's different when I speak in the marketplace at business settings. It's different. But in this church setting, I learned I've got to find examples for them. So if we're talking about, let's say it's a week that we're talking about having courage or whatever. Well, how do you talk to a 20 or 30-year-old about having courage, or 40 or 50-year-old about having courage is much different than how you talk to a 60 or 70-year-old. A 20-year-old needs courage to get out into the marketplace and finish school, find a great job, move out of the house, maybe move across the country, go where the jobs are. 30-year-old needs the courage, maybe in their relationships, maybe in their marriage, maybe in their family. 40-year-old needs the courage maybe to stop the job they've been doing and start the business that they want to. A 50-year-old needs courage to keep going. 60-year-old needs courage as they're looking at that season of transition. Maybe they're in a season of retirement. But a 70-year-old or 80-year-old, I learned, they need courage to get up in the morning. Their bones are aching, they're tired, they're exhausted. I'm saying all this to say it was such a lesson for me to learn how to reach them. And I will tell you this, they're still one of the toughest crowds that I ever talked to. And I try to make sure I get there 3 or 4 times a year to talk to them, because it gets me going. It freshens me up. But I've learned that when I can get on their level and talk to what they care about, okay, then that's very important. So that's the same thing for you. You have to take responsibility. If your listeners aren't listening to you, it's not their fault. It's your fault. Right? Because because I promise you, they will listen to somebody else. There's someone that they will tune you out and turn somebody in very quickly, right? Because that other person takes responsibility for them. So that's number one, is this: take responsibility. If you want to be interesting, take responsibility for your listeners. Number two, and I kind of talked about this already, communicate in their world. Communicate in their world. Okay, he says this: if you want to get your message across, you have to learn how to communicate in someone else's world. Connecting with others requires this skill. Too often, speakers are unwilling or unable to get out of their own world and say things from the perspective of their listeners. When that happens, not only is it unlikely that a connection will develop, it actually creates distance between the speaker and the listener. Now, this is also leadership. Okay, so an example I have is there was a mega church I was working for, one out in East County, and I was put in charge of this brand new ministry that they had. They were trying to grow it. They had about 147 people, and they wanted to grow it huge. And so they brought me in and they said, hey, would you head up the music department and build it and take leadership of this? Now, it was of the Hispanic ministry. Although I'm Afro-Latino, I grew up in a white family, pretty white environments. My name is J.C. Hurtado-Prater, but the reason why, there's a whole story behind that. I met my mother and stuff. So I don't really speak the Spanish language, but I love, obviously I'm Afro-Latino, born in South America. I relish the opportunity to get with what I would call my people, right? And I learned a lot. But here's the thing that I learned. I came in at the very beginning, and I came in with this very American, U.S. westernized mindset. Most of the people in that congregation were from Mexico and Central America. Okay. They have different ways of looking. So for instance, time. Okay. Time is a little bit more fluid in Mexico or Central America. Okay. In the United States of America, time is set, right? So if you say 10 a.m., it's 10 a.m. If you say 10 a.m. in that world, it's just a little different. It could be 10:30. I remember showing up to a wedding that I was invited to. The wedding was supposed to start at 2:00. And some of you, you probably know what I'm going to say here. If you have any family members that are more Hispanic in nature. And so I show up at 2:00. And as a matter of fact, I think I was late. Now, I think it's supposed to start at 2:30. I thought I probably should get there around 2:00. I pull in at 2:15 thinking I'm going to walk in late. This is embarrassing. Nobody was in the building. The thing didn't get started till about 4:30. I learned a lesson on that one, right? I learned a lesson. So things are a little different, but I came in with my Americanized mindset of leadership and how to do things, and I struggled for 2 years, and we didn't grow. We grew to a certain number, and then we just we'd lose people, and we'd never get past that number. And then I had to go back and I had to read leadership. Now, this is one of the things I got right here. It's how to lead in their world, how to communicate in their world. I took an entire summer off, maybe not a whole summer, like 6 weeks. And I found leadership books like John Maxwell, Warren Bennis, a lot of the, low hanging fruit, John Wooden, who was a coach, and tried to apply this. But one of the most important things that I read about was how to communicate in their world and how to lead in their world. And once I understood what they cared about, okay, what mattered most to them, we came back. And I remember after that 6-week break of me trying to figure it out, and there's a whole story behind that, came back, and this group tripled in size within 6 months. It took me 2 years and I couldn't grow anything. We tripled in size within, it wasn't even 6 months. We tripled in size in like 3 months. That's how quick it was. It's the reason why I do my job today. It's the reason why, because of that time frame in my life, I started implementing the principles that I'm talking to you about. That's why I get so excited about this, because this stuff works. But I found out that when I came back, when I loved them right where they are, and when I understood them and I can communicate in their world the way they needed to hear it, and to lead them in their world the way that they needed to be led, that's when everything started to happen. So you got to remember that, okay? I'm getting excited about this because I told you, chapter 8, this is so good. There's so many good things, and they've really impacted my own life, okay? So number 3 is this: capture people's attention from the start, okay? So this is more if you're speaking, if you're leading a meeting or something, or you're speaking in front of a group of people, and some of you are going to end up doing that. And if you run your own business, I'll tell you, one of the greatest ways to get your information out there is become a public speaker, right? I'm not saying you have to do it professionally, just speak professionally, but if you want to get on stages around, that's how people are going to know about your product. They're going to know about you. And if you're a really good speaker, there's some great opportunities and really great money in that as well. Okay. So if you're going to do this, you got to capture people's attention from the start. He gives some examples here. Start with a comment about the situation or the setting. You got to introduce yourself, relax, right? That's one of the most important things, is that if you're coming up there and you're too excited, especially from the beginning, and I've had this in my own life, and I had somebody in my life who really helped me do this better, and she recommended, hey, when you get up there, take a seat at a stool or something. And so I've learned in front of, and I'm excited right now because we're talking about this, but I've learned that when you're going into a new crowd, and obviously you got to feel the energy, and I do decent with that, but when you feel the crowd, the most important thing you can do is help them to relax, right? So you've got to be relaxed, okay? You can begin with humor. You can create a sense of anticipation, okay? All of that works. There's something else that I'm going to tell you. I was asked to go up. It's just in recent weeks, I was asked to go up to Colorado. I go up there a lot because the consulting firm that I work for is based out of Colorado. So a lot of their clients are in Colorado. So I fly up there. And so I flew up there and I drove into the Rockies, 3 hours away from the airport, way up in the Rockies, beautiful place. And there was this huge group of people that I'd never seen before. They hadn't seen me before. So why should they trust me? I want to give you a tip. Now, the person they did know was the person who was in charge of the event that day. They all had a relationship with her. They didn't have a relationship with me. And when she got up to introduce me, she didn't say very much about me. Now, she asked me, she said, how should I introduce you? And I just said, just tell them I'm a professor and a consultant. And that's all she literally said. She didn't say anything about, hey, I've known him before. He's spoken. He's done a good job. People have liked him. And so it's great to have him back. She just literally got up and said, our next presenter is going to be, and I had 4 hours with him that morning. Our next presenter is going to be JC Hurtado-Prater. He's a leadership professor and a consultant. Please give him a round of applause. And they did. So I had to get up there with nothing. Now I was smart enough, because I've been doing this for a while. Okay. So I was smart enough. What I did was I understood that room. I understood how hard she had worked to make all of those people feel appreciated. It was a leadership retreat. There was about 175 people in that room. They were all leaders, but she was the one who was responsible to put all together. And I knew that. I also knew that she needed to be, she needed some praise. And so the first thing I did is she did something very special for me. I was joking around about needing green M&Ms and Perrier water or whatever. She actually had green and blue M&Ms in my hotel room with Perrier water. It was the coolest thing. So I get up there, and the first thing I said, I showed a picture to the crowd, and I said, hey, can we give her a round of applause? Immediately, I got credibility with that group because they liked her. At some point, they probably wanted to honor her, and what they saw, and I'm kind of getting chills thinking about this, they recognized that she wanted to be praised. So to have an outsider come in and recognize her, and everybody recognized how hard she worked, it meant a great deal. And so I'm not saying that to brag about myself. I'm just saying I've done this long enough to kind of read rooms. One of the ways you can do it, if you're in a new room, find out who everybody likes in that room and say something positive about them, right? That will bring instant credibility when you're talking to a room, okay? Again, get into their world. Number 4 is this: activate your audience. Now, this is very important, especially with your people. Like if we were doing this in class, we would do a lot more interactive kind of stuff and have you moving around the classroom and interacting with groups and you'd be presenting and that kind of stuff. It's different online, but he gives some suggestions here. The first one I think is very powerful. Ask questions. And you can even do that from a stage when it's just you and you've got 200, 300 people in front of you. You can ask a question, right? And say, what do you think about this? And let people shout it back, and you can tell them, hey, shout back the answer to me. And you can go around and let people talk about the responses if they want to. That works. Get people moving. I don't do this a lot because I don't like doing this, but it's really good. And I know some speakers who are great at getting people moving, even if it's just every 30 minutes, stand up and stretch real quick. Obviously, if we're in a classroom, you know, at a certain point, we would take breaks, right? Ask people to interact with each other, group projects, that kind of works too. So that's number 4. Okay, so number 5 is this: say it so it sticks. Number 5, say it so it sticks. So here's some examples. Patrick Henry, you've probably heard about a lot of these back in history class. Give me liberty or give me death. That's by Patrick Henry. Patrick Henry. The next one is, I regret that I have but one life to give for my country. Great quote, Nathan Hale. A government of the people, by the people, for the people. Abraham Lincoln. Great. Winston Churchill said, never, never, never give up. John F. Kennedy, you probably remember this one from high school history class. Ask not, you could finish this one, right? Ask not what your country can do for you. Ask what you can do for your country. Martin Luther King Jr., I have a dream, right? What a great speech that was, okay? But they worked hard to figure out, how do I say something so it sticks with people? And these quotes have lasted decades. We're still talking about it even to this day, right? So here's how we do this. You link what you say with what people need. Again, this is the most important thing. It always comes back to the people. It's never about you. Ever, ever, ever. This is what gets younger leaders caught up every single time. I see it all the time. They make it about themselves. They make it about what they care about. It's never about what you care about. It's what they care about. Link it to what they need. Number 2, another way to say it so it sticks. Find a way to be original. Okay. As much as you can, be original. Okay. I'm lucky that I'm out there on this speaking track and giving these trainings. Very rarely do they see an Afro-Latino with curly hair come in. Normally it's a certain kind of person that walks into the room. And so I'm able to just kind of be original, you know, as it is. Find those things about yourself that make you different and make you stand out. And that's going to help you with leadership. It's going to help you with speaking as well. Use humor. Okay. I'm not really great at that. I've tried to do that before. I remember back when I was like 14 years old, I tried to be a stand-up comic. It was awful. It was literally the worst experience I've ever had. So sometimes humor comes out, but I'm not necessarily one that can really do humor well. But if you're able to do humor, that is a very effective way. Okay. I have found often, for me, if I'm able to read the room well, those moments come up from time to time. You know, somebody will say something funny and you catch it and everyone laughs and you go with it, right? You don't, I see speakers before they get uncomfortable with that because they feel like they're losing control of the room. No, if you're a great speaker, you let the control, you know, it's like this tension, right? So sometimes someone back in the back corner says something really good and they're going to get control of the room. Let them have it, right? Let it move in that direction. Someone else is going to say something funny. Let the room laugh. Let them have that. Back it up a little bit, you know, say something else. Come back to that joke a few times, maybe throughout the day. So I'm not necessarily, you know, good with humor, but if you understand how to work the room, then you can use that well. Use a shocking statement or a statistic. That's always great when you start something off. Say things in an interesting way, and it gives some examples. So you could say this: a person must sacrifice to get to the top. So you could say that, but a better way might be, you have to give up to go up. Okay. That almost sounds like a preacher preaching there, right? There's another one here. Relationships are important to influence people. You could say that. That makes sense. But another way to say is, people won't go along with you if they can't get along with you, right? That's a really memorable way to say the same thing. Okay. Learn how to pause. Now, this is one I'm going to be transparent. I am still working on this one. John Maxwell, when you listen to him speak, and between you and me, the only things that I might wrestle a little bit with John Maxwell is he talks about himself a lot. And so that's neither here. It's just more of a personal preference. Maybe a little bit too much for my taste. But the thing that he's a master speaker. He's been doing it for decades. He's a master. He understands how to pause. Okay, so this is something that I get so excited about things. I probably go a little bit too much, but especially when you're in front of a group of people, really master the pause. And I'll tell you, it is so effective at times. Now, you can't pause all the time. Then you're boring people and they feel like you don't know what you're saying. But if you know how to master the pause, that right there, without saying anything, will bring people back to attention. See what just happened right there, right? If you were listening to that on the podcast, you probably hey, where do you go? Well, no, he's right there, right? But it's just that, use that pause and watch great speakers. There's so many great, find out Simon Sinek, Tony Robbins is one of my favorites to listen to. John Maxwell obviously is great. There's a lot of great speakers out there that you can listen to. Listen to really great pastors, right? David Jeremiah, I used to work for him out in Shadow Mountain. I love to listen to David Jeremiah speak. He's phenomenal. So find a great speaker that you like to listen to and just listen to him. Barack Obama is phenomenal. And Hillary Clinton, in my opinion, Bill Clinton, one of the greatest speakers of all time. And I know he's kind of dated back in the 90s. If you want to listen to a great speaker, I don't think there's anybody better than Bill Clinton. He understands the pause. He understands humor. He is a master speaker. Listen to some of the greats. Okay. Number 6, if you want to be interesting. Okay. Number 6 is be visual. Okay. Use visuals. It's just what we did with the presentations, right? It's something, when I do these trainings, oftentimes I spend a lot of time in the PowerPoints because they've got to be, they've got to be interactive. They've got to be good. They've got to catch the people's attention, right? So make sure you're using visuals. And then number 7 is this. Okay. And this is really important. Tell stories. Tell stories. Okay. And John Maxwell says, perhaps the most effective way to capture people's interest and make the experience enjoyable is when you talk is to include stories. Whether you're communicating humor, hard facts, tragedy, storytelling improves the experience. I remember one time years ago, I was giving one of my first talks, and it was to a group of just men. It was at a church. Okay. I'm telling you, if you want to learn how to speak somewhere, go find a church that will let you get up in front of those people and you can mess up a little bit for a few years and just get better and better. So church has been very good to me in terms of giving me a lot of experiences to kind of make some mistakes in front of people and hopefully get better over time. But I remember I was trying to bring a point home, and it was a group of men. So with this, and they were serious men. A lot of these men were very successful. And so I knew I had to kind of grab the attention. Well, I shared a story that was very impactful for me. And it was about a friend of mine who passed away, and he passed away very tragically. It was a very tragic situation that he passed away. That story got everyone's attention. Right now, I don't recommend getting up there and talking about someone being murdered, and that's how he died. I don't necessarily recommend you do that in every talk because that's going to bring it way down. But that room, it was okay in that room, and I understood that room, and that was good. That got everybody's attention right away. And in that room, the senior pastor of that church, it was Shadow Mountain again. Okay, I spent 4 or 5 years there. And so the senior pastor there was David Jeremiah, who's a very serious talker. So I knew in that room, I didn't need to bring a bunch of humor and stuff because they were used to serious, talkers. So that got it. Tell stories. If you're going to end, I find that ending with the story is always great, right? You make point, and people listen. But when you bring that story home, there was just a guy I was listening to from a church, Shadow Mountain, actually. He was a guest speaker, and he's a pastor back in Georgia, and they just hosted him out there at Shadow Mountain. What a masterful job he did. Oh my goodness. He drew his point home, and he was talking about, I forget the spiritual principle he's talking about, but his story wrapped it up. He's such a great storyteller as well. It worked. Okay. So those are the 7 ways to be interesting. Here are 2 bonus ones that I want to give you. Number 1 of the bonus, and this is really good. Be the communicator that you want to hear. So when you watch yourself back, and I recommend that you do that. Watch yourself give presentations. I guess that's what I'm trying to say here. And then benchmark yourself up against the person you're trying to be. Now, obviously you can't be somebody else. That's another mistake that you don't want to get into. You can learn from all these other people, but don't try to be a Tony Robbins or David Jeremiah or whoever it is that you listen to, Brene Brown, who's a phenomenal speaker as well. She's another one to listen to. She's phenomenal. But you can listen to them and gain some things from them, but be the communicator that you want to hear, right? So when you're getting up in front of people, don't be the person that you've watched before who's making a lot of mistakes. And then I love this one right here, especially when it comes to leadership. Be the person with whom you want to connect. And I'll tell you, for me, I love people who smile. It just makes my day. And some of the greatest leaders I know, they've been great smilers. And so when I think about myself and how I want to interact with people, it's a lot of smiling. If we were, one-on-one, we'd share a lot of laughs together, right? Just organic laughs and smiles, because I love those kind of leaders. They can put people at ease, and obviously there comes a time you got to be tough. You got to make hard decisions. You can't be laughing and joking all the time. And I'm not saying be jokey joke, but for me, I love people who are able to walk in and smile and kind of put the whole room at ease. But be the person that you want to connect with. It's amazing to me, especially with younger leaders. They struggle to connect with other people, and oftentimes it's just shaking someone's hand, looking them in the eye, and just smiling at them, right? And your eyes say it all. And if your eyes can look at somebody else and say, I approve of you just the way you are, that's it right there. I promise you right there, you will hook, line, and sinker. People will follow you. They'll want to, because you're saying with your eyes, I care about you. And I like you the way you are. And maybe over time, right, there's things we have to work on and that kind of stuff. But if they know that you care, they know that they see you smile, they know that you approve of them, right? It's like this. This is the last thing I'll say before I let you go. Great leaders, maybe not so much today in today's world, but when I grew up, great leaders or people, when they put people in leadership positions, or when they look at a leader, what they're almost looking for is what they look for in their father or their mother. I don't want to say that. It's what they look for in a great father or a great mother. And especially if someone didn't have a great father or didn't have a great mother, and that's half the population out there, right? When you get up in front of people, this is something I'm giving you some secrets today. This is something that I try to do, is I tell myself my job is to be in the role of father today. And that sounds kind of weird. And I don't mean it to sound weird. But if I approach a room and say, I'm here to be a parent, I'm here to be a father, a great father, in my opinion, always is seeking the highest good of his kids, right? Is always loving and always warm and inviting, and wants them to succeed, and wants to laugh and wants to let them talk and let them have the spotlight. Okay. And if you're a female out there, maybe you come and you say, I'm going to be a great mother, right? And again, it doesn't mean you're, whatever it is that you think a mother should be or dad should be, it's still approaching it from a leadership perspective and carrying yourself well and being professional. But if you have that mindset, this is a lot of what people think is, can I trust this person like I would trust a really good father, or like I would trust a really good mother? So be the person that you want to connect with. Okay. Again, find great speakers. Brene Brown, right? If you want to find a female speaker, she is just phenomenal. There's a lot of male speakers out there, right? Find one and then say, hey, that's kind of want to be like. I spent a lot of extra time on this video because this I think is a game changer. It's been a game changer for me, and I hope it will be for you. So here's what I want you to go back and do. You know what the assignment's going to be. List off all 7, okay? 7 ways to be interesting. Which one stands out to you? And then tell me which one, tell me which one of the bonus ones that I just shared. Tell me which one of those stands out to you as well, and what you want to try to do to get better in this area of connecting with people. Hey, thanks so much for listening, everybody. I'll see you next week. I think it'll be our final podcast that we'll have next week, because then after that, can you believe it? We're already into week 8 where we're going to do our final project. I'll see you soon, everybody. Stay cool out there and have a great week.